Cool, now I can see you. Is this your at-home studio?
Hi, how are you? Um, yes, this is pretty much what we call my man cave. It's been changing a lot during time. I mean, through time, used to have like a larger desk and a lot more gear, racks, and synthesizers and stuff. And now it's just like trying to make it more compact and especially because it's at home. Luckily, technology allows me to kind of like just make things a lot easier to move around and um, really keep everything within one box. And as I said, like take a lot less room at home, just to actually have like my little working space. And I think as composers, I mean, we are so used to being locked in, even though right now we're living through a horrible pandemic. But I feel like for us, it just really doesn't change that much because we're always on quarantine. We're always locked in a hole, and even though it's daytime, I'm really I like to work at night mostly. So I close the shades and make it as dark as possible to put myself in that right element for myself. But everybody's very different, obviously. But yes, I mean, this is actually where I work, and this is what I work with, and everything happens right here. It's actually my little toy room, I like to call it.
So, from you work in a pretty niche area of the market doing independent films. So, if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and introduce yourself to members of our audience who may have not heard your music before.
Gladly. My name is Oscar Hassel. That's with a J at the beginning. Um, and I'm based in Chicago. And I am an independent film composer, and I work mainly with independent films. And I have been lucky to have been doing this for over a decade, and way over a decade. And I actually, it's been like a very interesting journey for me as a musician, mostly because it's not something that I actually planned to do during during my school years or younger or anything like that. It was almost accidental, I would say. I remember that I started doing this um, just as mostly as an experiment. Once I actually during taking some classes at school in electronic composition and stuff like that, and I started working with like well, experimenting first with Moog synthesizers and then Pro Tools, and then I discovered that you could import video to Pro Tools, and then everything just started like falling into place. I think little by little. I had a friend that was a screenwriter, and he was about to do his first film, and somehow he knew this other filmmaker that was actually that happened to be my first gig, pretty much as a composer, which was I'm not going to say the title of the film, but it was about a killer puppet. It was a horror film,
That sounds terrifying.
and um, and it was a very interesting project, and I was way over my head mainly because I didn't know anything about this. I didn't know how to approach the film. I did not know anything about spotting sessions or anything like that. And even though I was paid, and I was paid, for somebody that didn't know what they were doing, I was paid, I think, fairly well for the amount of work that I did. Um, so and it was actually it's been like very very interesting since then because I've been working on very interesting projects like not only from the United States, but I worked with other people in Italy or Turkey and other countries, and everything is actually so new all the time, or even here just locally or in the States. It could go from working on a project for the Museum of Science and Industry, or a few years ago I did a project with I worked on a narrative for the FBI, and it really just like I think it's just like really really interesting, like how in many different places I can be like different projects I'm actually participating in, and and it really and growing as a musician within the field also, it actually it actually has showed me. Well, I mean, when I started, actually, as I said, like I started on this feature film, I didn't know anything about it, so I decided to take some courses and at another school here in Chicago, and just to kind of like formalize, like, okay, no, get some more information about this, and it's been very very interesting since then, and I love it, and I think it's working with creative people is something that really just feeds you. It's something being surrounded by these people that actually just makes you kind of like become better or makes you want to be better also at what you do, and it's been fantastic since then.
Do you ever find that it's weird to try and talk about your job or explain your job to non musicians who don't even know how to read sheet music and might not know what you're talking about?
Oh, definitely. It's always interesting when people meet me and they ask me what I do. And I tell them the first thing that they say is like, "Oh, do you write so you write songs?" And yeah, and well, I've never written a song in my life, I think, and it's something. Um, it's something like it could be like sometimes easy to explain, and sometimes in situations it could be like kind of hard to explain. Unbelievably, that well, I mean, I find it unbelievable sometimes that there are people that actually don't even notice a lot that there's music in the background when they're watching something on Netflix or anything. I mean, everybody knows the big iconic, themes from like Star Wars or Indiana Jones or things like that. But, other than that, a lot of people don't pay a lot of attention to that. And still trying to explain that, well, what I do is actually it has to do support the narrative. We're a big part of the storytelling, and we actually become kind of like an extension to the director and even to the writer sometimes of what they want to transmit in certain scenes and how they want to transmit it, and they rely on us to actually like help bring up that mood or give that experience for the audience in that. And it's kind of it's easier said than done, I think that it's something very very unique what we do, so, and it's very how can I say, I, when I listen to other composers to what they're doing or what they've done, like James Horner or Alexander Desplat or or other people like this, it's just like really blows me away to think that there are people that are capable of producing or the way that what they write, and how they write it and how it supports the story, and I mean, I just wish that I hope I could bring up the same type of support myself. We become part of a team member. We're part of the film crew, and that's our place. The same thing as a person that has to do wardrobe. We actually have to really create a place, create a situation, support that situation with the story, um, and for some people it's easier to understand than others. I mean, it's just I guess it's just hit or miss a lot of times, and I think like a lot of times I walk away um, from a crowd and they kind of like end up scratching their heads, not really understanding what I do. But so maybe I'll just tell them that I'm a songwriter, and maybe that'll just make it easier for them. Who knows?
Mhm. So you hear, or at least I hear a lot about composers that after they have been composing more and more, they hardly ever touch their instrument and they don't really practice. But from what you're saying, I'm guessing that's not really the case for you.
No, it's I think every composer is very very different, and we have different priorities somehow in so many ways. And I actually I grew up with the piano. I've been playing since I was actually very very young. I started taking lessons since I was very very young, and it just became like a very very big part of me in my life. Like I can't picture my life without that instrument. And I also teach. I teach piano, and that helps me keep active at it. And it's really something that I really enjoy a lot. So when I'm not working here, I have a beautiful grand at the front of the living room with the big windows on the sides, and it's always it's one of my favorite things to kind of like take a break and go and sit and read something from the Well Tempered Clavier or something like that, and and just keep active because music is something that I feel like we're always learning. I mean, it's just like one of those things that we're always learning. We never finish learning. There's always new things to discover, even with old composers, and it actually, the more we get out of it, I feel like it kind of like it's something that helps us as well, as creative people, and it's and personally, it's just something that I just really, really enjoy. I can't see myself without it.
So you mentioned that you did study classical music composition when you were in college. Can I ask the last time you composed something that wasn't for a film score?
Oh boy. Sadly, and I'm ashamed to say it, I actually got into a really bad habit for a while that it's something that I'm trying to change right now where I would actually work on a project and as soon as I would be done, I would give myself a break until the next project and really just stop writing. And it's something that it's really really horrible. I think that a person or a composer should be always writing no matter what. But in my case, I kind of fell into like if I don't see a check coming, I'm not writing anything, and it's very very sad. So this year, I actually challenged myself to write start little small like write I'm challenging myself to write a set of short piano pieces, and I'm thinking eight actually, and I'm hoping to be done before October, actually have them all done hopefully, and just to kind of like get into that practice again of just like being productive no matter what, because sometimes it's just things come in a lot easier when one is active, and sometimes I mean I've taken like sometimes a hiatus of like 2 or 3 months that I'm not really doing anything. I mean I do practice piano and I'm learning new pieces or something, but I'm really not actively writing and or sketching or anything like that. And and I feel like we have to kind of like exercise our brain to do that. Otherwise, I'm always falling into horrible, um, this horrible situation that sometimes I have a deadline and I feel like I'm so out of practice or so how can I say, I do not have that routine of writing that I actually just feel like I mean I start worrying a little bit too much and I start stressing out a lot more about it. And then once I get going, it's kind of like a little bit easier, not super easy but easier. But I think that would change if I just remained a little bit more active and just tried to keep on writing. So I have some projects that I want to do for the remaining of the year, starting with those piano little pieces, and then we'll take it from there. Maybe some chamber work
Have
or
you
something.
found that now that you're a film score composer, you still work closely with performing musicians, or do you now create most of your sounds on the computer in Pro Tools or Logic or whatever?
Um, well, I even though I do love working in the system, as I don't know if I mentioned this before when we talked or anything, that it's technology has come a long way, and it has given us a lot. I mean, like seriously, a lot. And I work with digital performer mainly, and it's it really has made our lives easier to a certain point as composers. But and sample libraries are just becoming like so amazing. It really really once we learn how to like mock an orchestra, I mean it really gives us a lot, and it really, I mean there are ways to make it feel like very lively and everything, but there's something very special about real instruments. I mean, that's something that we really cannot reproduce no matter what. And I don't think that's ever going to be able to be done, no matter how great that cello sample is or anything. Having a real cellist in front of you is always going to be like a real different story. And recording a real cellist, it's always going to be like, I mean, I personally, and I think everybody that I know actually we just prefer it. And mainly, it, in our world that we live right now, we are expected to deliver, even though they're not sometimes finals. Just like to deliver demos of actually the cues that we sent in. And even with people, even in projects where you're going to go into the studio and record real musicians, they want to hear a demo, they want to hear a mock-up, and that's the other way that they're going to prove it. We're expected to do that, and I don't think anybody could actually get away from that anymore. I mean, and not myself, not anybody that I know, and the same thing goes for Danny Elfman or anybody that's actually out there in Hollywood. We all have to kind of like really we're all expected to hear demos. I think there's only very, very few composers that get away with it because they trust them that much and they're that special. Like I know that where I've read somewhere that John Williams, when he first presented, when he was working on Jaws with Spielberg, I mean, and just having that 2-note theme, and he actually presented it to him on the piano, saying like, this is what it's gonna sound like, and Spielberg just said like, great. We can't do that anymore. We just can't. I mean, we had to really give him the bass, we had to give him the trombones and the tubas, and we had to put all the bells and whistles there. But and going back to what I was saying earlier, it's just like working with real musicians there's a lot of nourishment into that, not only into the possibilities, but it's also like such a great experience. First of all, I think most of the musicians that I know, I mean, we're just fun people they're just fun people. I'm not saying myself. I don't know if I categorize myself as fun, but most of the musicians I know are very, very fun to be around, and I always have an excellent time with them. But they bring a lot of life to the music. So even if it's myself recording on my own piano here for a cue, I mean, this past feature that I worked on, I mean, it was mostly done here on the box, just mainly samples. But I did bring a violinist, and we recorded several tracks and several cues with them. I even brought in the saxophonist to record some source music, actually, and it was really, really fun, And the other thing that we have to see is that they're willing to support us. They put in the time, and I mean, the same as us, that actually as composers, we put a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of effort to what we do. They did the same. They put like a lot of practice, a lot of discipline, and a lot of blood and tears and everything into their craft of playing that instrument. And they're our colleagues, and I think we have to respect them the same way. And the same way that, as a composer, like, I don't see myself working on a project for free, because it's like I know the time that I have to put in, the work that I have to put in to actually achieve what I know and what I can do. The same thing goes for you as a composer. I mean, we can't expect instrumentalists to actually like perform or record for free, and I think we have to respect that from them too. So I always look for a budget to bring other people in, and I really make sure that they get paid as well. That's very, very important. We have to support each other, and even though it is actually something cool for us to actually like experience to record like a real musician into our music and layer it with samples, even if we do it that way, it's actually a very good experience for them. But we all win if we support each other, and if we treat them right, they're willing to do it again. And if we have good relationships, I mean, it's all really about having friendships and supporting each other as musicians. We are part of a special club. We're all creators or recreators or whatever you want to call it, but we're all doing similar things, and I think we all should really, really support each other on that.
All right, so we got 7 minutes left. If you don't mind, because Zoom will cut us off eventually, if you don't mind me asking, what is your favorite story to tell from your adventures as a composer?
There are quite a few, to be honest. But I think that the one that I remember the most is actually, I think like about 6 or maybe 8 years ago, I was working on this film from some people from New York, and really cool people actually, and a really nice director, and you know, they were just a very they were a cool team to be working with. Yeah, they had like great motivation, and they would just be very contagious. But when I was actually working on the opening sequence of the film, for the opening credits and everything, and the shot, I mean, was just beautiful. It had to do with about this piano tuner, and he's walking into this piano store, and he's preparing to work on the piano, and everything's in red, and it's just like it looks so amazing, and I felt like so, how can I say, so motivated about what I was watching. So I made like this piece that I feel was just like felt so natural to that. And and I sent it to them, and I was very excited that they're gonna love this. And they said, "No, can you try again?" And I was a little bit hurt, and which is wrong, but it happened. So I went ahead and did the second try, and they said no, and I did a third and a fourth, and I ended up doing nine different pieces for
Gosh.
that sequence, and right when I was actually arriving, actually, I think I did eight or nine, or maybe there were eight. But when I ended up I think I was getting to the ninth. Like I was almost in the middle of finishing the cue, and then suddenly they call me saying, "Drop what you're doing. We love the first one. We just fell in love
Oh
with it."
no.
And 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 I was like so angry. I mean, at the moment, and I was actually so uh, you know just really angry about it, because I felt like I lost a lot of time and everything. But the truth is that I learned a lot from that experience, and one of them is that when you're working with directors or producers, even though they have a lot of experience in what they're doing, hopefully, I mean, most of the time I've had I've been lucky to actually work with people that have a lot of experience in what they're doing. They don't speak music, and sometimes you have to sell them, your idea or something. And in this case, they just needed to give it another listen, and then suddenly it kind of like all clicked for them. But and we have to be patient about it. And as a team member, we can't, we can't take it personal. We can't take it. We can't get angry about it or anything, or I mean, like, or very frustrated about it. It's about, they don't like it, moving on. You're part of the team. We have to do what they say. And 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 I learned a lot from that, and I ended up with like eight very good sketches, that later on, I used at least two of them on some other films, because I think they were very good, and they were very well accepted on some other projects. So it all worked out. I mean, but yeah, and it's something that I tell, like, also my students are actually interested in going into film. It's just like, this is gonna happen, and that's not the only time that it happened to me, but that was actually the first one that really did happen. The first one that I did write so much for that, and it's gonna happen to everybody. And just be prepared, and again, don't take it personally. There's a lot to learn. There's always a lot to learn from all of this, and we just have to cope with it and really adapt.
That's awesome. So you already mentioned Jaws. Now that you've been staying inside even more, what have you been listening to?
Well, I always go back to Mahler second, and that's a work that, ever since I was like 16. I mean, I think I always come back to it at least once or twice a year. I mean, it has always made an impression on me. Um, it's just like, You know, I think as a film composer, it's just like always gonna go to like John Williams and James Horner, and I love Alexander Desplat's work, and but you know, I do go back to Stravinsky and Bach, and lately even Steve Reich, actually, that I've always admired his work too. I mean, he's such a interesting person to listen to.
Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been awesome getting to talk to you. Any last thoughts?
Thank you so much for inviting me. This is actually a lot of fun. Final thoughts. You know, the same thing that I tell my students everywhere. It's just that no, things are never what we think they're gonna be, or you know, either good or bad. There's always a way, and if we really love what we're doing, we are gonna get. You know, we're gonna put the work into it. I mean, we have to, and if we really love what we're doing, you know, um, it's we're going to be compensated somehow. And I feel like very, very privileged and very, very, I guess I would use the word blessed, you know, to actually be doing what I do. I never, and really, really making a living out of it. It's just like really, really mind blowing to me. And I could have, um, and I, you know, we really just have to really, really try hard. We really have to work, and we really have to be humble about it, you know, because we are always learning. And no matter what school we went to or who our teachers were, you know, there's always something new to discover, and we should always be like preparing that ourselves that we're always going to discover something new, and that's very, very important. And so, you know, if you really find something that you love, just like really, really go for it, and go all the way, not just halfway. Really, really go for it. Go in deep, and you might feel like, you know, sometimes we run into a little bit of trouble, but if we really keep pushing, things work out, and mm, just like really never get discouraged about it. Just keep pushing.
All right. Well, thank you again so much for joining me today. Have an awesome day.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed this.
Of course. Bye.